Okay, this is Canon Law I in Semi-Exile, Fall 2020, Video 3, Lesson 4, General Norms, Parts 1 and 2. We may do a little bit on Part 3, just to get a start, and so we can maybe go a little bit more leisurely when we get to that material next in our regular session. Okay, this is the chapter and lesson on general norms, and there's a fair amount of material in it. Quite a bit of it I don't think is going to give you too much trouble. But there is a very challenging part that is going to have to do with things like administrative decrees, and so I want to make sure we have class time to discuss that. And also on this video, one of the things when we get to part 2 that we'll discuss is loss of office. But this is very important, so we need to discuss this in class too. But we'll really cover it both ways. Okay, well, we begin. Part 1 is on persons in the church and their juridical status, starting at 46 in Woodall. And Woodall tells us that there are two, when we're talking about the juridical status of a person or entity, there are two types of, quote, persons in the church. And here they are. There are physical persons and juridical persons. I'm covering something up for the time being, but we'll get to it. So a physical person, that's what you think of as a person. It's an individual human being. It's exactly what you think. A juridical person, on the contrary, is like a corporation. So think of a corporation when you hear the word juridical person. I tell people often that basically juridical person is the church's term for a corporation, or it's the canonical term for a corporation. That may not be 100% correct, but it's very close. There's a good 95% overlap. The only kind of real difference is we have different types of corporations in the church, different needs for different corporations. Okay, well, let's talk about physical persons first. Again, this is just an individual human being, a physical person, a person with a body. How do you become a physical person in the church? As you know, that's through baptism. Woodall does a nice job here. This is on 49, and he talks about how baptism really imparts to us a radical alteration. And then it has both an individual aspect, it changes us as a person, but also a social aspect. And in a lot of ways, it's the fact that it has a social aspect that makes it have a juridical aspect too, because we're a part of this community now, where we've received the forgiveness, the remission of original sin and of personal sins, if we've done any, but we're also incorporated into a community. And as we've probably said before, and we said in discussing question 96 of St. Thomas in the law treatise, because law concerns the common good and usually not matters that are only of the individual good, it's this kind of social aspect of baptism that's going to account in large measure for why there's also a juridical aspect of baptism. So what does baptism mean? Of course, union with Christ and union with other Christians. Woodall, as I say, this is on 49. Woodall does a nice job here. Okay, what's our relationship with non-Catholics? when you may be surprised to learn, but when we say the faithful, um, the Christian faithful, the Christi Fideles. Um, you've probably heard that term, Christi Fideles, the Christian faithful. Who are they? They're not just Catholics. They're all of the faithful, or I'm sorry, all of the baptized. So, for your reference there, look at Canon 204, Section 1, and Woodall covers this on 50. I think you know this term, Christa Fidelis, but I'll just show it to you here in case you don't have it there with you. It's right here, Christa Fidelis. And that's the plural with the E at the end. If it has the I at the end, fidelis, I believe that's singular, and fidelas is the plural. So all the baptized are the Christian faithful under Canon 204, Section 1. However, you want to look at Canon 11 as well. And Canon 11 says that only Catholics are bound by merely ecclesiastical laws. When we hear that term, merely ecclesiastical law, that means human law. The part of canon law that is human law, not the part of canon law that's repeating divine law or natural law. So we're saying all of the baptized are the Christian faithful, but only Catholics are bound by merely ecclesiastical laws. Okay. We started out asking what does one's status depend on, and our first question is, well, what kinds of entities, what kinds of persons are there? We've said there's two kinds, physical and juridical. We're still talking about physical persons. There's several factors that can affect our status, just our status in the church. Not necessarily in terms of prestige, but in terms of rights, in terms of duties, and just kind of more in terms of state of life. So one thing that can affect our status is, of course, holy orders. We're going to have additional rights and duties, and we're also going to be, those in holy orders are going to be foregoing some of their rights, or choosing not to exercise some of their rights. Another is, of course, religious consecration. You're going to have new rights and new duties, new responsibilities too. Something else that's going to affect our juridical status in the church, and this could apply to a layperson, a member of the clergy, or a religious, holding an office. What office do you hold? This is going to affect your rights, duties, and responsibilities. Woodall, as you'll see, has really a great interest in the priesthood, and I think you will see that when you see how he discusses it, and he really emphasizes the significance of holy orders bringing about a change in the man in kind, not only in degree. It's not, well, I'm a little more holy because I'm in holy orders. It's not the idea at all. Of course, the idea is that there actually is there really is an ontological change, a change in the being. So we talk, following Augustine, of the sacraments that imprint a character, and holy orders being one of them. And he speaks of of course, the priest acting in persona Christi, and of a new relationship with Christ that comes with ordination. Now, is the priesthood of divine law, or is it of human law? If you look at Canon 207, you'll see that it says that by divine institution, there are clerics. That's 207, Section 1. So this is this is not just an arrangement. This is not just a good way that we found to do things. Um, this is by divine institution. We could not, no matter how much trouble we have with clergy, we cannot do away with clergy. By divine institution, there are clerics. By contrast, cardinals, the office of cardinal is not of divine institution. Well, cardinal's not really an office; it's sort of a dignity. That idea, I mean, we've had it for 1,000 years, or really longer, actually. But with the prerogative to elect the Pope for 1,000 years, not essential to the Church, though. We do not need to have cardinals. We do need clergy. We do need clergy. It's not just a matter of convenience. Okay. So we talked earlier about the who are the Christian faithful. A lot of the time when we talk about the faithful, that term is used as a synonym for laity. You might even hear somebody say, you know, both priests and faithful are welcome, in a sense of referring, in a sense, to his faithful, maybe to his flock if he's a pastor, and that's understandable that we use that term, but we want to be careful there. For one instance, we don't want to suggest that the priest is not one of the faithful. He's still a member of the faithful, even after he becomes a priest. What kind of in our really the approach of Vatican II, I guess you'd say, would be that we're really emphasizing the priest as being drawn from the faithful, but also still being a member. Okay, speaking of clergy, especially priests and bishops, we need to talk about, this is on 52 in Woodall, the difference between sacred power and the power of jurisdiction, also called juridical power. So I've got a little schema here, and again, Woodall has this on 52, and it's pretty good. Maybe this picture will help you a little bit as well. Okay, so at the top, we've got our two things, sacred power and the power of jurisdiction, or juridical power. When we talk of sacred power, we're talking especially about the cleric's sacramental power, his power in the sacraments. Most at the core of that, of course, the celebration of the Mass and the other sacraments too, but let's say especially the Mass. He's able to celebrate Mass because he's a priest, because he's ordained. It's the ordination, it's nothing else. It's not just that he's deemed a priest in law. It's because he's been ordained. He's actually been ordained. So with sacred power, we're really talking about for the most part, the power to let's talk about the Eucharist for the time being. Say the power to celebrate the Eucharist, the power to confect the Eucharist. So that's what we're talking about. Where does it come from? Ordination. But then we also have this other power that's very important, the power of jurisdiction, or juridical power. And here we're talking about faculties and administration. So it's going to be, an example of administration would be your ability to be the official witness at a marriage, your ability maybe to dispense your faithful from a fast day or something like that. That would be administrative. And then faculties, that can go together with the sacraments as well. Some of the sacraments we require faculties. The ones we're especially concerned with are confession and marriage. So for the Eucharist, to celebrate the Eucharist validly, all you need is ordination. All you need is the sacred power. But to hear a confession validly, you need the sacred power. You cannot absolve without the sacred power of the priesthood, but that's not enough. You also need the power of jurisdiction, the juridical power. That means you have to have the faculties. So, if you don't have that, that your absolution is presumably invalid. We're going to talk about some exceptions to that. We don't want the faithful to be hurt by that. So the church has some measures that she's adopted that in some circumstances will validate that confession even without faculties, but presumably, but that's more by way of exception. Presumably, if you don't have the faculty, your confession is presumably invalid. The confession where you gave absolution. So again, here's our difference between the two: sacred and juridical power. With sacred power, we're talking especially about validity of sacraments. But even with juridical power, some sacraments are going to require faculties for validity, and the power there, juridical, whereas sacred power comes from ordination, juridical power comes from church law or from your office. Saying that it comes from your office, that includes coming from church law, since your office is provided for in church law. Also delegation. Delegation can be according to church law, or the law itself sometimes gives you the faculties. For instance, even if you're a priest who's been returned to the lay state, if you encounter somebody who's dying, who needs to go to confession, the law in that circumstance gives you the faculty validly to hear that confession and absolve those sins in that case of the dying person. So if this isn't clear, let me know and we can talk about it more. But you've sacred power, I think, is probably pretty easy. The juridical power is apt to be a little less familiar, but you probably have encountered it in some degrees, and it answers the question, or maybe it raises the question: why do some sacraments require faculties but others don't? We can talk about that someday. Okay, so that's kind of part of our discussion of ordination. Let's go back. We said a moment ago that religious profession also affects your status in the church, and Woodall has a section on that at I think 52 or 53, and he discusses the evangelical councils. This is another area. Woodall's a priest, but I don't believe he's a religious, but it seems to me he's pretty good on these issues of discussing the consecrated life, and also entities like societies of apostolic life as well. But here he again emphasizes that with the evangelical councils, a new configuration to Christ comes. But it's so it sounds a little bit like ordination, but we know it's different. It can coincide, obviously, religious life can coincide with ordination, but they're not the same thing. So he helps us out here by explaining this. The new configuration belongs to the holiness and mission of the church. So there's a new status, but the status is not based on the sacraments. It comes from the profession of the evangelical councils, and I believe he quotes John Paul II saying, discussing how, again, John Paul, not a member of a religious community himself, but having a great interest and reverence for religious life. John Paul said that consecrated life has been present from the beginning and always is a part of the church's life. In fact, a lot of people believe that um, if John Paul kind of felt that he may have wished to resign the papacy, um, or at least or retire or something. That's kind of speculation, but people who were close to him would say that he may have wished to become a I think I think the speculation is a Carmelite. I think he had some devotion to John of the Cross. So anyway, not sure if that's totally true, but it's very clear that he had a great interest and reverence in the religious, the consecrated life. So we've just been talking about these differences in status. Again, though, we always have to go back to baptism and remember. Yeah, differences in status, differences in function, uh, but there's still a basic equality among all the faithful, all the baptized in the church. Okay, let's um, let's talk more about physical persons. Again, we're we've really been talking about physical persons almost completely, and uh, now we're just going to go on, but talking more about individuals, but not necessarily clergy and religious. What about the unbaptized? We said all of the baptized are the Christian faithful, and Catholics uh, among the Christian faithful are bound by ecclesiastical laws, by canon law. What about the unbaptized? Do we have anything to say about them? Does the law, hopefully as individuals, we care about the unbaptized, but what about the law? Does the law care about them? I think you could say it does. They're not they're not considered persons in the church. Um, so don't go around to all of your unbaptized friends and tell them they're non-persons. That would probably be somewhat unecumenical to do that. Um, we're not saying they're not persons. We're just saying they're not persons in the church. That comes with baptism, saying like almost like saying, yes, you're a person, but in a sense, you're not sort of a citizen of the church in that way. They are still relevant to canon law, and I think it's easy to think of some ways that some reasons why the law has to take account of the unbaptized. One, of course, is that a Catholic may marry an unbaptized person. So we have to decide, well, how does that merit? What's the status of that marriage? What additional Are there additional duties that the Catholic has there? Do we have duties to the unbaptized person to tell them something about our faith? So marriage is one issue, and another, of course, the unbaptized person may be simply a not yet baptized person, but someone who's interested. And so we have that right, the right to approach the church and say, hey, I want instruction. I think I'm interested in joining your faith, but I need to know more about it. I'm looking to you to explain it to me. Another thing, you may not have come across this yet. You may have, but it would not be too surprising if you came across what I'm about to tell you in your ministry. And that is, there are some people who really have a great appreciation of Catholic institutions, but they do not wish to become Catholic themselves. Or again, maybe they don't yet wish it. Maybe they will down the road. You could see this in a number of areas, but especially education, where you see uh, people who, again, really don't have any or at least very much attachment to the Catholic Church, but they realize, um, look at what this school has done in our community, and look how many people have benefited from it, even non-Catholics. And so you can have this, and really do. This is not hypothetical. I could give you real examples of it. Um, so these people, they might just have this just goodwill towards the church and towards especially Catholics involved with this school, but they also might wish to donate to it. They might wish to support it financially, or even give a building or give property or something. But then we've got of course, a relation of justice with that person, and we have to be sure that we honor that person's request. If he gives his money for a scholarship fund, even though he's not Catholic, he's not baptized, not a quote person in the church, we need to use his donation for the purpose that he gave it. We can't just say, well, he's not he's not a member of the faithful, so we can do what we want. No, if we accept it, we accept his gift for the scholarship fund, we have to use it for the scholarship fund. Okay, on 53, Woodall talks about some things that affect a person's condition in the church. He mentions 5. We're going to just focus probably on 2 or 3. But the ones he mentions are age, the person's age, the use of reason, whether the person has use of reason or not, um, domicile. Domicile basically means where you live. Relationships, here he means family relationships. Who are you related to? And that may affect, if you're holding an office, it may affect who you can appoint to which positions. It may be unlawful for you to appoint someone who's related too closely to you. And then right, the person's right, R-I-T-E. How does that affect his condition in the church? Well, let's start with age. Um, our first kind of benchmark with age is the age of 7. Below the age of 7, you're considered to be an infant. And then if you're at least 7, but not yet 18, you're considered a minor. Then if you're 18 or older, you're considered an adult. These would be good terms to have in your glossary, and I think this is quite clear from Woodall. But there's some kind of exceptions or special rules for some ages. For instance, a female can marry at age 14 and a male at age 16. Now, when we talk about marriage, probably when we get to Canon Law II, we'll talk about some challenges that this would present if you really had a 14-year-old female wanting to marry a 16-year-old male. There are some other challenges, but at least presumably the law recognizes the possibility of a woman, girl, female of 14 and a male of 16 getting married. Also, at the age of 14, a minor can be baptized without parental consent. Let's see, also at the age of, let's see, a couple of other relevant ages that you've probably heard of, relevant to clerical life. The age for ordination to the transitional diaconate, the minimum age is 23. For ordination to the priesthood or the permanent diaconate, the minimum age is 25, or if already married and being ordained to the permanent diaconate, 35 is the age. And then at the age of 75, many offices are lost. For instance, the office of bishop, that's the retirement age. Should go back to lower ages. In penal law, the age of majority is considered to be 16, so you can be an adult at 16. But that does not apply for victims of sexual abuse. They're not considered adults at 16. They're not considered adults until they're 18. Okay, that's our first category. Remember, we said Woodall's talking about rights and duties being affected by one's condition, and he gives us these 5 things that affect our condition: age, reason, domicile, relationships, and right. Reason, that's just do you have the use of reason? Do you have the reasoning faculty? Normally, we assume this comes around age 7. So if a child is 7, we assume that he or she has the use of reason. If you're over 7 and you do not have the use of reason, you're treated as an infant. You're considered an infant. Use of reason is also relevant for marriage law, because if you don't have the use of reason, or if you temporarily lose it, that would invalidate your marriage. You may have the use of reason, but because you're drunk, you're on medication, you were just hit in the head, you don't have the use of reason now, maybe temporarily, but you get married anyway, that marriage probably invalid. Okay, our next category is domicile, and this is a pretty important one. Domicile basically means where you live. The canon is 102, and here's a couple of different terms: domicile, quasi-domicile, and vagus. What gives you domicile, what gives you quasi-domicile, and what makes you a vagus? 3 different things. Domicile essentially means where you live, or where you intend to live, and it determines the communities that you belong to. So it will determine the parish you belong to and the diocese you belong to. Now, how do you get domicile? You get it by just intending to live in a place. Here I think we need to correct Woodall. He says, and I think this is on page 53, he says you intend to live in a place permanently. That's not correct. You don't need to intend to live in the place permanently, but you intend to live there indefinitely. I'm intending to live here, I'm not intending to move, but who knows what'll happen. I'm just here indefinitely. I'm not here just for a 3-year period. I'm not here just for the baseball season. I'm here, don't have any plans to live, don't have any plans to leave. I'm not planning to leave. That's being here indefinitely. So he kind of misspeaks here when he says you have to intend to live there permanently. Really, the word is indefinitely that he should have used. So you either, the place you are, you're intending to stay there indefinitely, or you actually live there for 5 years. You either intend to live there indefinitely, or you may not intend that, but you happen to live there for 5 years, for a stretch of 5 years. When that 5 years has come, you have domicile there. So you could get domicile much more quickly. You could get it really the day you move to a place. If you intend to stay there indefinitely, you've got domicile right away. If you don't intend to stay there indefinitely, then it takes 5 years to acquire it. Okay, what's quasi-domicile? Well, as you know, quasi means almost, so it's like you almost have domicile, but not quite. Or you could almost call it semi-domicile. It's like domicile, but it's not quite. And quasi-domicile you acquire either by intending to live in a place for just 3 months, or actually living there for 3 months. So a lot of you would not have domicile in Saint Meinrad, Indiana. You might have it, but would be very easy for you to acquire quasi-domicile. And again, you can still belong to a community, a parish, or a diocese through quasi-domicile. If you have neither domicile nor quasi-domicile, you are a vagus. A vagus basically means like a wanderer. You don't have a permanent living place. And this might be someone who, say, um, drives a big 18-wheeler truck for a living. They may not live anywhere. They may essentially live in their truck, so there isn't any diocese or parish that they're permanently attached to. There is a way that the church has offices and structures for migrants. Um, uh, Somebody like that, a truck driver, wouldn't necessarily be a migrant, but pastoral care might be provided in that way, or just wherever he goes, if he can find pastoral care, probably needs to acquire some familiarity with where he is or where he's going to be. But those are going to be our main categories of. It's going to determine your relationship to your parish or diocese. You have domicile, quasi-domicile, or you're a visitor. You're a vagus, a wanderer. Okay. For the purposes of marriage, you have domicile where you actually live. Again, for most people, so even without having been there 3 months or 5 years and with no intention to stay, if there's a place you're actually living, you have domicile there. That doesn't quite solve the problem of the truck driver. We just have to find some way to deal with the truck driver in his situation, and if he wanted to get married, find some way that maybe a place that he formerly lived, that he had some connection with, or a place that his spouse has a connection with, perhaps. So again, by domicile or quasi-domicile, you acquire a pastor and an ordinary. Okay, our next category, again, we're talking about things that affect your condition in the church. We talked about age, reason, and domicile. The next one is relationships. This really means family relationships. We're not going to say much about this. It's relevant to marriage law because it affects who you can marry. You can marry a relative as long as they're not too closely related to you. You cannot marry your sister, and you cannot marry your first cousin, but that could be dispensed. It could be dispensed to permit you to marry your first cousin. Could not be dispensed to allow you to marry your sister or your mother or your grandmother or your daughter or your granddaughter. Those things could not be dispensed. So the key relationship when we're talking about family relationships is the relationship of first cousin. So in marriage, it's forbidden to marry your cousin, but that could be dispensed, and that would not be terribly unusual for that to be dispensed. But also, if you're the bishop, you have a number of appointments to make, and for your really important appointments, you can't appoint anyone who's closer to you than first cousin. So, for instance, your vicar general cannot be your cousin, or closer, cannot be your brother or your father. The same with the Episcopal vicar, the same with members of the finance committee, and also if property is going to be sold, you either cannot sell it to your cousin or a closer relative, or perhaps you could with some safeguards, so that but then it could not be decided by you. You essentially would almost have to turn the decision over to someone else. So anyway, that key relationship is the first cousin. A lot of appointments could be invalid if you appoint somebody, if you're bishop and you appoint somebody who's closer than your first cousin. Then finally, among these things that affect your condition, Woodall talks about rite, R-I-T-E. Not a whole lot to say about this. If the two two Catholic spouses are of different rights. You've got a Roman husband and a Byzantine wife. They can agree which rite or which Catholic church their child will belong to. If they don't agree or they don't decide, the child belongs to the father's right. But then at age 14, the child can choose for himself or for herself which 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 of the two churches he wishes to belong to, and that's Canon 111 that says that. If you miss the age of 14, you don't make a decision, or you're not in that category and you want to change rights, there is provision for that under Canon 112. You can request that from the Holy See. I'll tell you what my sense is that if you were a Roman Catholic and you wanted to join an Eastern church, the Syro-Malabar Church, Maronite Church, Ukrainian Church, that would be fairly easy to do. You have to have a reason, and the reason often is going to be connected with marriage. However, if you wanted to go the other way, you are a Syro-Malankar Catholic or a Ruthenian Catholic, and you want to become Roman, that can be more difficult. And this isn't about the law, it's more about kind of policy, I think. And what I think is really at the heart of it is a fear of the much smaller Eastern churches kind of being depleted. That's my sense. I could be mistaken about that. If any of you have experience with this, that would be I'd be very interested to hear about that and see if you have a either the same sense that I have or a different one. So that's certainly on the table. Okay, we've really completed what we need to say about physical persons. Now we're going to talk about juridical persons, but also another category. We said our main two types of persons are physical and juridical, but there's also another type that Woodall doesn't mention at first, but also is important, and this is what he calls a moral person. And I've got a line between moral and juridical because it has some similarities with a juridical person. Once you find out what the moral person is and what some examples of juridical persons are, I think it'll be pretty clear to you why we have these two different categories. They have similarity. They're both categories they're like corporate entities in a way. We're not talking about an individual person. Here's what Canon 113 says. It says, the Catholic Church and the Apostolic See have the status of moral persons by divine disposition or divine law. So it's saying there are these two entities, the Catholic Church and the Holy See or Apostolic See, and they are moral persons by divine law. Essentially, they're established by the will of God. Now, why are they called moral persons and not juridical persons? We said we've got this term, juridical person, that's something like a corporation, and we even said that these two entities, the Holy See and the Catholic Church, are corporate bodies in some sense. So why are we calling them moral persons instead of juridical persons? Woodall gives a very commonsensical and I think a very good kind of guess. I'm not sure if it's a guess or if it's true knowledge on his part, but it makes a lot of sense. And he says why we do this, why we call them moral persons and not juridical persons, is to make clear that they have the status that they do. The Catholic Church has its status. The Holy See has its status, not by church law, not by merely ecclesiastical law, but from divine law. That their status comes from divine law. And so you could maybe have defined them as a special type of juridical person, but to make it even clearer, the law is going to say by the divine law, we've got these entities that we're going to call moral persons, the Holy See and the Catholic Church. Other corporate entities in the church are going to be called juridical persons. As we said a few minutes ago, a juridical person is like a corporation. So if you want a good definition, this is from a different canonical text, but I think it's kind of a nice definition. This is another introductory canonical text called, I think it's called A Handbook on Canon Law, and it's by a Spanish canonist named Jose Martin Degar. And he defines a juridical person as a corporate body of a social nature that has a life independent of that of the individuals belonging to it at a given time. So it's an entity that's supposed to go on in time. It doesn't just exist for us, but even for people in the future that may wish to be involved with this entity. And also, if you use this definition, you see how close it is to a corporation. The church is the canonical version of a corporation. What are some examples? This, I think, will make it pretty clear to you. A parish is a juridical person, a diocese, a seminary, a religious congregation. These all are juridical persons. So these very important entities in the church, really entities the church needs: a parish, a diocese, a seminary, a religious congregation. What is it? And that's a step by the church law itself. The law itself says that these entities are juridical persons. That means they have corporate status recognized essentially automatically by the law. These entities don't need to apply to be recognized as juridic persons, as corporate entities in the church. The law kind of recognizes them automatically. Okay. Although a physical person and a juridical person are different entities, a juridical person is comprised of physical persons. It also likely will have property as well. But there has to be a physical person to act for the juridical person, kind of the head of it, the administrator, the president, is going to need to be a physical person. Now, when I showed you the card the first time on different types of persons, I concealed something from you about juridical persons, and that was just because there are two kinds, and we didn't need to get to that yet, but now we do. So we've got our card there with our physical person versus juridical person, and then our two very special examples of moral persons. When we're talking about juridical persons, there's two different types: public and private. By far the most important is public. By far, all the groups that I just mentioned, dioceses, seminaries, parishes, religious congregations, they're all public juridical persons. So we would call them not just a juridical person, but a public juridical person. What is exactly a public juridical person? What it is it's something that exercises a function that belongs exclusively to the church or to the hierarchy. It exercises something like educating future clergy. It's not really something we want to have Walmart do for us. right? So we want to do that ourselves. We want a church entity, a church corporation to do that. The same with parishes. Who's going to oversee the administration of the spiritual goods of the church to the faithful? Again, don't really want the post office doing that. We want our own church corporation, uh, corporate entity to do that. So it's something that does the work of the church, of the hierarchy itself. Um, uh, Other things that belong specifically to the hierarchy would be things connected with liturgical books, teaching in the name of the church, visitation of seminaries, etc. Now, there are some things that are a part of Catholic life, but they don't belong to the hierarchy necessarily. Um, for instance, I form a Catholic book club. I form a Catholic prayer group. I open a Catholic bookstore. That's something I don't need to be a public juridic person to do that. I'm not really, yeah, I'm doing it because I'm a Catholic, but I'm not doing it in the name of the church. I'm not doing it in the name of the hierarchy. Okay, if public juridic persons are things like dioceses, seminaries, religious congregations, what are private juridic persons? Well, private juridic persons, this is a new idea that only came in with the 1983 code, and there really aren't very many of them yet. So it's really hard to say um, what we can look at the law and see what they are legally, but it's hard to really get a fix on it without some good examples. I think a way to describe it, though, is it's a type of association, an association of the faithful, um, and there are several different types, about 4 or 5 different types, but it's one that wants to be particularly close to the hierarchy. You could form, like me forming my book club, I could form my book club and not want to be especially close to my bishop. That would be okay too. Not that I'm repudiating the bishop, but I just want to run it independently, the way I want to run my book club. Um, with a private juridic person, um, you probably would have to be a more sophisticated entity than a book group, more something like an entity that promotes vocations, something like that. Maybe a media apostolate. If you wanted to, you might say, well, we think we'd really benefit by being closer to the hierarchy, and you might seek the status of a private juridic person. Um, so things that are we get to another question. How do you become a private or public juridic person? With a private juridic person, there's only one way, and that's by decree. Usually it's going to be your bishop. He recognizes you as a private juridic person. It's probably going to be after you've existed for some time and proven yourself. Um, with a public juridic person, uh, you could be recognized by decree. A public juridic person could be established by decree, but the law also, just on its own, as we said a minute ago, on its own, recognizes some entities kind of automatically as being public juridic persons, things like seminaries and religious congregations. Um, okay, why do we have private juridic persons, or at least have the possibility of them forming? Again, I think there are some that actually exist, but most groups that you know of, even really well-known ones, uh, um, it's not always clear what their status is. Even on their websites, it's not always made clear, and they don't always say if they have been established as a private juridic person or not. It would probably be helpful if they did. But the reason that this kind of category was created was to recognize lay initiative and the rights of the laity, and for the church to kind of give like a seal of approval, or the bishop to be able to give a kind of a seal of approval to those things, to an association that's doing a particular good in the diocese. Okay, let's see. Okay, that's the end of part one. That's kind of our longer part for today. On essentially just persons in the church. Now we're going to go on to uh, part part two, which is about offices, and if we have time, maybe even a little bit about I'm sorry, yeah, about part three, part two, offices. The concept of an office in the church, Woodall gives it to, this is starting at 76, but Woodall gives it to us, it's also in Canon 145. An office is a responsibility of divine or ecclesiastical disposition. It's established in a stable manner for a spiritual purpose, with rights and duties of the office being established by law or decree. That's Canon 145. It's something that has a responsibility. You establish this office to carry out something. We have the office of pastor to provide for spiritual care, etc. It's either of divine or ecclesiastical disposition. That means it's either from divine law or from human law / merely ecclesiastical law. Human law, again, is going to be the canon law that's merely ecclesiastical law. It's established in a stable manner. It's not just for you to, we're establishing what we're going to call an office just for you to clean up the parking lot. That's not really an office. That's just something to do. But this is in a stable manner. This office is going to endure over time. It has some type of spiritual purpose. It has rights and duties, and those rights and duties are established by law. The law itself says what rights and duties a pastor has, or by decree. If the office isn't specified already in the code or in other law, a decree can say what the responsibilities are. So here's a little schema of some of these points that Woodall has mentioned. Canon 145, we're talking about offices that can be established by divine disposition, meaning divine law, or by ecclesiastical disposition, meaning human law, or merely ecclesiastical law. What are some examples? An office that we know we have from divine law itself, essentially from scripture or tradition. Two main ones would be the Pope and the Bishop. Those actually come to us from scripture itself. What would be some offices that are of human disposition or ecclesiastical? The chancellor of a diocese, nothing about chancellors in Holy Scripture, but even higher offices, quite high offices, the president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, pretty important position, but not one that has anything to do with divine law, purely human law. Even the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Now we know the Holy See is a moral person by divine law, and or by divine disposition, and same thing really. And the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith is kind of a part of the Holy See. But this office of prefect, again, that doesn't come to us all the way back from the 1st century or from Scripture or anything. That office of prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, that also is one of human law or ecclesiastical disposition. So seeing that some of these very high offices are still ones that are of human law, I hope that reinforces our point that we had in our first class about, hey, don't shortchange human law. Human law not only is necessary to complete divine law, but it even has this certain exaltedness in its own sense. It disposes of some very important matters. Okay, that's kind of our concept of what an office is. Can laity hold any offices? Yeah, they can hold some. For some good examples are they can be the financial administrator of the diocese, and very often are. they can be a judge on a tribunal, on a marriage tribunal, and lay people can also be chancellors, could be the chancellor of a diocese. And obviously lay people often are in charge of their own lay apostolates. So, but what offices can they not hold? They cannot hold any offices that require sacred power. Makes sense, right? Sacred power comes from ordination. They're not ordained. They can't hold those offices. And then there are some offices that 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 mean that the person is has what comes with the office is what's called the full care of souls. The full care of souls. You have the and sort of entire responsibility for the spiritual well-being of the people under your charge. Best example is a pastor, right, or a bishop. But think of a pastor. If the office requires the full or includes the full care of souls, then only a priest can hold it, not a deacon. A deacon has care of souls. He's a cleric. But he cannot provide for the full care of souls. Obviously, he can't hear confessions, can't celebrate the Eucharist. So those are our benchmarks on what laity can do, what deacons can do, and what priests are needed for. Okay, on 78, Woodall talks about different ways that offices are filled, different modes or ways of appointment. He gives us 4, and you should know 3 of them. One of them is just very unusual, so there's no point in really discussing it very much. The first one he talks about is from Canon, and this is at 78 in Woodall, and here we're at Canon 157. The first type is free conferral. That just means the person who bestows the office, he freely decides who to put in it. Now, it has to be a suitable person. It has to be somebody who satisfies the needs. For instance, what if my bishop thinks I'm just the greatest guy in the world, and so he wants to appoint me pastor of Saint Isidore Parish? And he says, "Boy, that Dunnigan, he's what a great guy. And I'm bishop. I'm entitled to freely confer the office of pastor of Saint Isidore. I'm going to give it to Dunnigan." No, can't do that. I'm not qualified. The office of pastor of St. Isidore entails the full care of souls. I cannot provide the full care of souls. I'm a layman. I don't have sacred power. So ordination, priestly ordination specifically, will be required for pastor. But that aside, he's picked somebody suitable and somebody who is qualified for the office. He can freely decide, this is the best person, this is the best place for this deacon, and this is the best office for him, or this parochial vicar, or this priest to become pastor. So free conferral. Again, the offices that are filled that way, probably a lot of offices in the church filled that way, especially pastor and parochial vicar. The next way is called presentation, and that's provided for in Canons 158 to 163. What presentation means is that there's some entity that provides a panel, like a number of choices, a panel of choices, and then somebody else chooses among those choices. For example, the nuncio in a country works with the congregation of bishops to get candidates to fill a vacant see. So let's say the Archdiocese of Baltimore is vacant, and so the Congregation for Bishops in Rome and the nuncio in the United States try to find three good candidates, and they present their candidates to the Holy Father, and the Holy Father usually picks one of them. He doesn't have to, but usually he picks one of them. That's presentation. He's presented these candidates, and if he finds one suitable, he picks one of the three. So we've got that as our second mode. Free conferral, number one. Our example is parochial vicar. Our next is presentation provided in those canons, and the bishop is an example there, both auxiliary bishop and diocesan bishop. Our next mode is election. A lot of offices provided for an election, common in religious communities to have offices provided in election. Most famously, of course, the Pope is elected. Now, we don't have a canon listed after election here because we have a special constitution that provides for papal election. Those are the three modes that you really need to know. The final one is called postulation, and you can see the canons there, 180 to 183. Postulation is it's basically a variation of election. You can look at the canons if you're interested. I think what it is when there's a difficulty finding someone who's qualified, maybe having an option to let that person fill the office anyway. I'd have to brush up on it myself, but very unusual. You just don't hear this word very much, especially in this context of filling offices. So really, those first three are what you want to know: free conferral, presentation, and election. Okay. Now, ways to lose office, and this is something we'll want to talk about in class too, because it's extremely important. Several ways you can get office, several ways you can lose office. Very common that you'll lose office because the time limit has been reached. You were appointed for 6 years, and now the 6 years are up. Here's the thing, though. Do you lose office right away? You're appointed for 6 years. 6 years was up yesterday. Today is 6 years and 1 day. Do you disappear as pastor? Are you no longer pastor? Actually, no. And the two canons you need to look at are 184 and 186. You still hold that office until the bishop notifies. Let's talk about a pastor. Until the bishop notifies you that you've lost it, or that you're more likely being appointed to a new office, of course. But even though your term is up, your 6 years is up, and you were appointed only for 6 years, you don't hear from the bishop in that time. A month has passed, 2 months have passed, you haven't heard from the bishop. You are still pastor. You're appointed for 6 years. This has been 6 years and 2 or 3 months. You still are pastor. That sounds crazy, right? You're holding over. You're there beyond the term you were appointed for. Why is that? Practical reasons. Let's say there's no one available yet to be a pastor, or the bishop hasn't gotten around to appointing somebody, or the bishop just forgot. You forgot too, maybe. There's maybe just some negligence, maybe understandable, maybe not, but that someone hasn't gotten around to replacing you, or there's some crisis, and we haven't been able to address parish vacancies because we have some much bigger crisis going on in the region or the country. So you're still pastor. Why? To ensure that your administrative actions are valid. Now, because these are going to include things like dispensations. You gave a dispensation from someone so that they could get married, maybe get married without doing it in a Catholic ceremony. We want that to be valid, even though you're a little bit beyond your term, so you're still in office as pastor. We want your confessions to be valid, the confessions that you hear. We want we said dispensations, delegations too. You delegate somebody to to witness a marriage, you delegate a deacon or a parochial vicar to witness them. Well, if you lost office immediately, the reason you have power to delegate is that you're pastor. If we had you lose your office immediately on coming to one day after 6 years, you would not have the power to delegate. And if that deacon or parochial vicar went and witnessed that marriage, that would be invalid too. All these dominoes falling. So that's why we have these two situations in Canon 184 and 186. Even if you haven't been notified yet, you're still in office. Okay, how else can you lose office? By death. Not surprisingly, you cannot take it with you. You are not going to arrive in heaven as the pastor of St. Isidore. You have lost that. You haven't lost your holiness, you haven't lost your priesthood, but you have lost your office as pastor. You're not taking it with you. You reach a certain age, 75 or something, whatever the retirement age is for the office that you're in, very similar to the time limit being reached. Again, you reach this age, nobody notices, and you continue witnessing marriages, you continue confessions, you continue dispensations, you continue delegations, doing everything even though you're 75 years old and a day, 75 years old and a month, 75 years old and whatever, 10 months. You're still in office. The bishop hasn't notified you, so you're still in office, just as if you'd reached the end of your term without being notified. Transfer, Woodall talks about this on 79. That's a very common way to lose office. Are you willing to go to St. Barbara's? You've done a great job here at St. Cecilia's. We need somebody at St. Barbara's, and that's agreeable to you. A lot of the time, a bishop will want to give you an assignment that's agreeable to you, and hopefully not very often just feel that he has to force it on someone. So transfer is going to be a common way to lose office. Most importantly, the thing we need to talk about both now and in class is removal. So here's all of our different ways of losing office: time limit, death, age, transfer, and removal. Removal is kind of the traumatic one. There's been some trouble, and probably some lay people have complained against you, and maybe you don't have many friends in the chancery, so some people want you removed, and the bishop may agree with them. This is a kind of a bigger concern or it's a more interesting question for pastors, because pastors have real security in office. So they cannot be transferred just on a whim. There's a specific procedure for the removal of pastors. So if you really feel this is a bad decision, you can challenge it, and you can require the bishop to go through the canonical procedure. So it's the thing that's important to remember is, if you're asked to resign your office and you don't think there's a reason to resign, or even this unpleasantness that happened at your parish, you don't think it's sufficient for you to be removed, or you think you can work it out, you could require that you could say no to the request that you resign, and then the bishop could either just leave you there, or he could go through the removal procedure. It's a real safeguard that you have as pastor that you don't have in very many offices in the church. And you have it for your own benefit, but you also have it for the benefit of the people. There's supposed to be stability in office so that you get to know the people, they get to know you. You are the head of the community. So there's a real value to not changing the head of the community too often. So this is really, my opinion is, that if a pastor's asked to resign, he needs to give an answer to his bishop, of course, but he should really consider it very thoroughly. When I say he has to give an answer to his bishop, if he's asked to do it, if he's asked into a meeting at 4 and presented with a form to sign to resign his office at 4:05 and didn't even suspect that this was the purpose of the meeting, my opinion is you do not need to decide right on the spot there. If you feel like you need some time to think about that, maybe pray about that, maybe talk to a canon lawyer, or just talk to somebody you trust, a more experienced priest, or just think about it. Just even if you're pretty sure you want to do this, maybe you say, "Yeah, this has been tough. I think I might be getting rid of a headache here. It doesn't hurt to take a couple of days to think about it, or at least one day." Again, you want to be courteous and respectful. You're not putting off the bishop. You're saying, "I want to consider this thoroughly before I make my decision." We can talk about that more in class. If you are if you're in consecrated life, though, and you're a pastor, of course, a lot of parishes are entrusted to religious communities. You really do not have the same security in office here as that a diocesan priest would have. The reason is that you are essentially in your office while both the bishop and your superior agree. So if one of them withdraws their agreement, you can be removed. Now you've got stability in your community, but really not quite this stability in office of pastor as a diocesan priest would have. Okay, that finishes us up on loss of office. I'd hope to talk some about part 3 on laws, but this video's gone on over an hour already, so I think we'd better just stop, and I'll see you on Tuesday. Thank you.